Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Tech Tuesday. My name is Vanessa, and today we are going to be talking about Data Core for secure computing. We have Alice Chin and Sarah Ben-Mamar, who are from our Data Core team, and they're going to be walking you through what Data Core is and how you can use it. Before we get started, I just wanted to let everyone know I am recording today's session. So if you want to review the material later or even share it with some of your colleagues who may not have been able to attend today, please expect a follow-up email from me later today with a link to that recording, as well as any other hyperlinks that we might discuss this afternoon. If you have any questions during today's session, I do have everyone muted just to prevent any background noise from playing, but please feel free to post anything in the chat for questions, or if you'd prefer to ask your question over the mic, just raise your hand and I'll be sure to unmute you when the opportunity arises. So without further ado, I'm going to hand
Okay,
it over to Alice and Sarah. Thank you guys so much for joining us today.
great. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for having us. I think we did a Data Core Tech Tuesday a little over a year ago, and just seeing the changes that have occurred since that. I mean, Data Core just continues to evolve. So thank you all for spending some time with us this morning. For those who don't know me, I'm Alice Chin. I'm the Data Core Manager here at Weill Cornell. I've been in this role for about 7 years now. And prior to joining Weill Cornell, I had about 11 years of experience in management consulting, working for PricewaterhouseCoopers and IBM. And I work primarily in the government sector. So I know, kind of have a little bit of background of working with secure information. So let's see. And we also have Sarah Ben-Mamar, the Associate Director of Research Services here, joining today. And between the two of us, we're going to tell you about Data Core and kind of just also the data retention and practices as well. So so this is what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to just provide an overview of Data Core, and just tell you what the service is. I spent a little bit of time just kind of walking you through the Data Core environment online, and also talk about the process for establishing a new Data Core project. And then I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Ben-Mamar to talk about data retention, and I'll definitely leave some time at the end for some questions. So, just an overview of Data Core. What is Data Core? So, essentially, Data Core is a service that we provide here at WCM through the library. It's a secure computing and storage environment for researchers to use, where they can work in a collaborative shared space. Uh, when especially when you're working with data for studies that are working with data, requiring, secure data, secure regulations around the data that they're working with. So primarily, Data Core came into existence to kind of to support studies that are dealing with high risk data. I don't know if you have seen this before, but the data classification levels are defined in Weill Cornell policy in 500.03, and they classify different types of data between high risk, moderate risk, and low risk. Data Core mainly focuses on the environments are set up to support studies using high risk data, essentially anything PHI, CUI. Uh, Many of the data sets that we work with require us to fill some type of a security attestation to kind of certify that our environment meets the proper regulatory and security controls to work with that type of data. And so we are working constantly with data use agreements. We're working with data providers to receive the data. We ensure that the data stays within the data core. So our environment, our services are mainly kind of primarily focused on, ensuring that researchers have a safe place, a secure place, um, and can work collaboratively with their data. So Data Core is a preferred solution for studies working with high risk data. For those of you who have been to one of these presentations before, this is our core framework. So data core resides within the WCM network. We also provide access externally through a gateway. We use remote apps um, so that you can access it from wherever you are. We have multi-factor authentication to get into the core. Our team works with ensuring that access is only provided to those who are approved for a study. So there is controlled, restricted access to getting in and out of the data core. And then there's a level of security at each layer through the firewall, through the external network, and then going into within WCM, there's also another layer of security as well. So looking at my notes, make sure I haven't gone through these too fast. Yeah, so whether it's through firewall or encryption, there are controls. So this diagram kind of shows the overall architecture of the data core environment. As you can see, data core kind of resides within, as I mentioned, data core resides within the WEC network. This kind of shows the kind of the workflow of processes within. So kind of the key players are, the data core team. The PI is basically who's driving the work. They apply for WCM. They submit a WCM IRB and get it approved. And then they submit, once their IRB and governance is approved, they'll reach out to the data core and request an environment to conduct their study. We go through a whole onboarding process. And we also work directly after the project is onboarded. We work with them directly to provide any software analytical tools that they need, or any change requests, whether you need to add users, remove users, facilitating the data transfer. If you need to export data out of the data core, we just ensure that there's no PHI that's leaving the environment. And it's definitely a collaborative or back and forth process, a relationship that we have with the PI and the research team. We work with the research team for any technical issues they might have when we support them in that way. And also we work with the data provider and complete any necessary assessments or certifications that they may need to obtain the data. So we essentially act as custodians for data. All right, some of the key features of Data Core. We use the WCM CWEED as the way to manage the login process. A CWEED, if you have external collaborators on your study, a CWEED can be requested for non-WCM researchers as well. We remote access through remote apps, which is a kind of a more user-friendly gateway. One of the things that we have seen more of is kind of the increase of projects being hosted on our GPU nodes, which uses a Linux environment. Typically, those researchers are used to working with like a terminal backend, command line processing. And so we have that environment as well, and we provide a secure login node for them to access GPU resources in a Linux environment. But the majority of our projects are still operating in a Windows environment, very graphical, user friendly interfaces. Upon request, they can transfer data in and out of the environment, and upon completion of a study, we kind of also facilitate the process for archiving the data to meet just regulations with not only what the study requires, but also institutional policies of retaining data after a study's been completed. We have the ability to provision on both on-premise computing resources and cloud cloud environments as well. So basically one of the benefits of DataCore is providing kind of a shared, a common interface for everyone on the project team to see. So everyone, when they log into DataCore, everyone in the research team sees the same thing, has the same interface, has access to the same tools. So some of the kind of more popular tools or standard tools that we provide are a lot of research groups use SAS and Stata as of kind of a popular tool as well. We can also provision database, relational database services as well, tools there. Python is also a very popular tool that is used for our research teams. From a data perspective, we provide a data structure where we keep the source data in a read-only place so that the data integrity is kind of protected there. We provide a shared space for the entire project team, and also we provide individual work area spaces inside the DataCore environment that can only be seen by the user. So just kind of the current snapshot that I pulled together. Currently, we have 68 PIs and about 300 users, just over 300 users in the core right now. And we're supporting 88 projects. Since the inception of DataCore, you can see that the service has just continued to grow over the years. We've had over, close to 95, almost 100 PIs, numerous users from all across, and we recently just onboarded our 200th project, the 200 project, so we continue to grow in that area. So some of the notable data sets and studies that we support, a good number of our projects support studies using data from CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid services. That data provider actually has probably one of the strictest controls around using their data. We have to get recertified every year and attest to a security attestation questionnaire, which when we initially kind of got the certification, the process took a good 6 months just to fill out the over 100 controls that were requested for us to be able to host CMS data here at Weill Cornell Medicine. So that's I think we have about close to 30 projects that are being hosted on there, and I see Anam's on the call too, so she might have the exact number, but there are a good number of our projects in DataCore are CMS projects. We host a lot of insight projects, and these are projects that are using insight data, and they might be using slices of insight data, and we'll host that particular study inside DataCore for that particular purpose. We also have data from the Defense Health Agency. We've worked with that data provider to get military health data. Another big project that we've been hosting for many years is the PELS project, which is the Pediatric Epilepsy Learning Health System. We receive data from multiple sites across the country. It's just a kind of a nationwide study on a regular basis, and the study team, takes that data and performs their study and kind of publish and do and provide reports on this study. SARE Medicare is another data provider that we've worked closely with, and recently we submitted an attestation for the New York State DOH Medicaid data, which was a kind of a recent attestation that we just did. So those are kind of the this gives you just a little bit of the taste of the data that we're hosting inside the core. So so that's just an overview. Before I hop into the demo, are there any just quick questions? I think I can take a few.
Yeah, I think you might have touched on this, Alice. There's a question in the chat. Do we encrypt PII and PHI data before sharing the data to researchers?
The storage units are encrypted, if that answers the question. Just to clarify, So we have data encryption in motion and data encryption at rest, and both of those kind of components are met. Does that answer the question?
Since GPU is expensive, how are you managing that?
So, okay, so I'm currently in Data Core. We've kind of have two sets of Data Core projects that we're hosting using GPU resources. So within Data Core, we have a set of three GPU machines that are shared across the institution. So we own those machines, and I can give you a link. I have a link later to kind of our pricing structure. If your study can be hosted on like a shared resources where you're sharing the resource across, other folks in the institution. We also have a GPU project that's being hosted in the cloud, and it is very expensive. Depending on the instance type that you're requesting. So we work with our AWS, our cloud team, and we provide a quote. Typically, we we scale based on we choose the instance type that meets the computing needs of the study. One of the things that we did implement with our AWS GPU projects is user-enabled start stop of the machine, which helps manage the costs. So once we provision a AWS GPU environment, or even any of our AWS projects, we can provide the functionality for the project team to turn off and turn on the resources as they need it, because that's one of kind of the benefits of the cloud is you can only pay for the resources that you're using. And what we see a lot of times is some research teams, process really hard for a couple of weeks, and then they don't need the compute resources because they're getting ready for a publication or they're getting ready to present, and they don't need the compute resources, so they can just turn off the machine, so that they're not incurring costs that way. So that's one thing that we've provided for project teams and cloud resources.
And Alice, hey, this is Sarah. If you allow me just to add a little bit onto that, especially for the first question regarding encrypted PI or PHI data. Just to be clear, we usually don't allow identified data to leave data core without it being de-identified. That's kind of our policy. It all depends on the project needs, of course, but that's why a data core is usually the primary recipient of identified data. When you deal with high-risk data, we take care of reaching out to the data. If you're with an external data provider, we take care of reaching out to them and getting the data directly from them, so you don't have to deal with that. Just wanted to clarify that part.
Great. No, thanks for that. That is a very good comment. Yeah, because all the work is done inside the core. So typically PHI is not leaving the environment. There's no access to the internet. Anything coming out of the data core is facilitated. There's a request process and there's a review. So
yeah, and I see there is another question from Laura Bradford. Thanks for the question, Laura. So Laura is asking, what is the relationship between data core and wider? That's a good question. Technically, you can see data core as the tool you would use when you reach the step where you have your data, you need a safe place to analyze it and run your analysis, basically, especially if you have high-risk data. Data. Once you are done with typically the analysis of your data, you are thinking about publishing, and after publication comes the time to think about what to do with your data. Should you get rid of it, or should you archive it? Typically, you need to archive it. That's basically where wider comes into play. That's kind of the step after. Like, it's more a tool that you would use when you reach more like kind of the end of the data life cycle, typical data life cycle. Why wider is connected to data core? Well, because what I just explained. So the natural life cycle of the data. but also technically because basically the system that manages data core is the same system that manages Wider. There are two different applications, two different tools. They're not disconnected, they're absolutely connected, but they're fundamentally different in their aim. Data core is for analysis of data, Wider is really for archival of data once you're done with your project. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, we're going to go into data retention a little bit at the end as well.
Yes.
Yep. So that might. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move over to the demo. And if there are more questions, we can circle back on those. All right. Sorry. I'm just trying to get out of, here we go. All right. So let's go into kind of the process of logging into a data core environment. So we access a data core through remote apps, which is basically a gateway to a remote desktop session over to the environment. So we log into remote apps. Again, we're using centrally managed credentials. So we're using Seaweed. And I'm going to go into our test project. So basically, here you would only see the projects that you have access to. So typically, most folks would only see one or two. I have most of them on here because I have visibility there. So once you get into remote apps, you launch your data core project. So I hit DCore 1, which is our test project, and it opens up we log into a remote desktop client. And this is the warning message that goes on that you're about to enter in the data core environment, and you're in an area that is working with confidential data. We multi-factor into it. So for instance, right now I'm on a Mac laptop. I use a Mac workstation, but I am logging into a Windows environment. And as you can see, it's almost like a screen painted session into a Microsoft Windows environment. And here you would see just the tools that are installed on there. We typically have SAS, R, Stata is and we can also bring in any applications or tools that are needed for your study. There might be some licensing costs, or if you have your own license, we can bring that in to the environment as well. And then so this is basically it. We would typically, if you look. You will see that here, you would definitely, depending on your project, you will see your project workspace here in Explorer, or however you get to your data. So in the structure is basically there's always a read-only shared or source directory, a shared directory, and then an individual work area director for each individual user that you would only see yours. So in terms of applications, typical, you can find whatever tools that you need here. There's SAS, R. Typically, yeah, SAS and R usually install. SAS Stata and R are in the environment. Some teams use SQL Server Management Studio. Yeah, depending on your study, we can install the proper tools there. So that's just kind of a basic overview of how it looks like when you get into data core. It's nothing fancy. It's just basically you're in a Windows environment. I don't have access. I don't have a test environment for the GPU node, so I can't show you that. I can show you an AWS cloud project, which is very similar to what I just logged in was an on-premise Windows server that Windows data core environment. Let me see if I can get to one that is an AWS 157. This is good. Very similar. You log into a remote desktop session. With cloud, there are, there are several different kind of levers that we can pull. Like on-prem, we are hosting currently in 2016 and 2019 Microsoft Office. In the cloud, there's the ability to host in Amazon Linux. There are different operating systems like you can choose. There's definitely more options to choose. So the cloud just looks a little bit different. It's got a red splash and screen, similar. Authentication. It runs through a login script, so which some of the security controls that are applied to the environment are there. So the biggest difference between cloud projects and on-premise projects are our on-premise data core projects are on shared resources. So you will be in a virtual machine that you would be sharing resources across multiple projects. With cloud, you have your own individual instance, and typically it's scaled. The amount of resources are scaled based on what you need, whether you need 8 CPUs and a lot of memory, or just less CPUs, more memory, or more CPUs, less memory. I mean, there's definitely a lot more options and configurations in the cloud that you can choose from, because you can choose a different instance type. The shared, the traditional on-premise data core projects are shared resources. Those are the most economical projects to host, honestly. But again, the team can definitely you can definitely reach out to the team, and we could find the right fit for your research computing needs here. So similar, this has R in there. Let's see, just a little bit of a different interface. This project has Anaconda, so, and again, you have an attached storage here that has where your data is located. So shared and source, and then a work area directory too, that you would see individually. So this gives you a little bit of a taste of, what it looks like to log into data core, how it looks like, what the user interface is like. Let's see. Get back to my slideshow here. There we go. All right. Yeah, some of the things like we've seen since the last time I did this presentation, we've definitely seen an increase in the number of cloud projects that we've been hosting. More and more researchers are more open to exploring that, exploring like cloud research, cloud computing resources. Again, what I mentioned this before, that you just have the ability to scale with what you need with regards to like CPU and RAM. There's definitely much more different instance types that you can choose from. Operating systems, we have a kind of an image for a Windows and a Linux kind of image that has the security configurations that meet data core requirements. So we definitely have that in place already. Recently, we've been working with the team using the relational database options in AWS. Again, AWS is the only cloud option that we currently have in data core. I know there's GCP out there. We had looked into Azure, but we don't have an Azure kind of build here at WCM yet. But when that does come, we do have a solution in place for that. Another big benefit of the cloud is that you have a dedicated research environment. You're not sharing resources across projects. And when I say enhanced security features, there are a lot of things just built into the cloud that I've really enjoyed working with. There's some really great monitoring tools that are built in the cloud. So just seeing the amount of resources used at a particular time is really helpful, so that we can further navigate how, if we need to scale up and scale down. What's nice about the cloud is if you are running a process and you realize that you need more resources, we can change the instance type very quickly keep all the configurations the same, and it's seamless, and then we can scale it back down when you don't need so many. So I really appreciate the functionality that we have inside the cloud. Cloud hosting, you pay it as you use. Or I guess there's kind of two models. You can get a reserved instance for if you're using compute resources for multiple years. You can get there's different pricing options that that are available, or you just pay for what you use. And again, I think I touched about on this earlier. It's just the ability that we've provided for users to start and stop the instance, so that you're not being charged for resources if you're not using them. So that was here. All right. So, okay, next I'm gonna just keep moving here. Next I'm just gonna walk you through the process of how to establish a new data core project. We have a whole onboarding process that is triggered basically by our data core onboarding form. And you can find this form under, wait, this is the data core work request. Sorry, I think that's the wrong form. Let me pull up the right form for you. Sorry. Let's go. So if you go into My Help Desk and do a search for data core onboarding form, the form will appear and it will look like this. It will bring you to this page. Here it will walk you through a series of questions that that we need to in order to set up your data core environment. And even prior to this, the data core team is always available for you to reach out to if you need, a quote on your project, or you're trying to flesh out, what kind of environment you need. Feel free to reach out to our team, and we can definitely work with you to help identify, what your needs are. So, yeah, so I'll ask you a series of questions, the tools you need, operating system, what kind of compute environment do you need? So we gather, yeah, this is the first step. We gather the information, and then someone from our team will reach out with you to verify the information and just capture anything else that we may need to set up the environment. We'll ask questions about your data, the governance associated with your data. Yeah, Data Core is a service that that has some rates associated with it. So, and I can direct you to the rates for using the service in a little bit. And so this is the Data Core onboarding form. So that this is kind of one of our big forms that we use to get started. All right. All right. Oh, here we go. So the data core rates can be found here on this link. Sorry. We have a per user sliding scale. So that we use research storage rates. So many of the rates are direct ITS rates, and then there is some kind of administrative rates for the data core team that are included there. One of the benefits is that we do take advantage of volume side steps of software that we're able to obtain as an institution for reduced rates, and that we're able to pass that along to in our projects. And again, please reach out to the team if you need a project quote, or if this is something that data core can be beneficial for your research needs. Oh, this is the data core work request form. I just wanted to quickly show you that kind of request area. Back on to. So after your project is onboarded in data core, you would use this form to kind of manage kind of the operational component of the data core, meaning that if you need an import, you need to import data in, export data, you need to add users or remove users from a project, you need to close the project, you need to install new software. This would be kind of where you would request those services from our team. that's pretty straightforward. This is after your project has been established. All right, let me get back. Getting to the end here. Okay. And all right. So, and I think Sarah talked about this a little bit, and I'm going to actually send it over your way, Sarah, in terms of how data core fits in kind of the whole research data management lifecycle here. And there's the data core component there's a data core component. In addition, there's also a data catalog piece and also the data retention piece as well. Sarah, I think I'm gonna
Yeah,
switch
I
it
can
over here. Yeah.
talk
That,
more about it. Yeah.
yeah.
So how, I mean, there's some history there too that I think might be relevant to mention to understand how all this ecosystem was kind of built. So it basically all started with data core. Obviously, our researcher needed an enclave to analyze sensitive data sets. And we wanted to avoid to the researchers to have to go through the hassle of identified data and all the security that goes with it, security requirements, sorry. So this is how data core became kind of the first line or first responder when high-risk data is involved. The data core expanded over time with more and more projects and more security also needs to respond to latest regulations. A little bit later, data catalog was built because we thought, well, people are investing so much energy and so much money, quite frankly, into generating these data sets that are sometimes very costly to produce, to generate, and deserve some visibility. I mean, to some extent, obviously, in terms of like we don't want to expose all these data set to everybody, but the idea of the data catalog was really born out of trying to make those data set visible to the community, at least the existence of these data sets rather than really the data set themselves. Obviously, there are a lot of restrictions to access them. And you need to follow the protocols we have in place. But this is how basically the data catalog started to fit within the data core. It's again like wider, as I mentioned before, it's part also of the same, it's managed through the same system that data core and wider are using. So it's all connected technically behind the scene. So data catalog would, if I go back to this research data lifecycle that I mentioned before, once you have finished analyzing your data, you think about publishing it, and when you publish it, you want to as much as possible make it publicize it as much as possible, publicize the work as much as possible. So data catalog was also supposed to help with that purpose as well, not for papers, but from a data set perspective. And then later down the research data lifecycle, as I mentioned, after you publish, you're thinking about what you're doing with your data. Do you need to discard them, all of them, or portion of them? Do you need to preserve them? And so this is where basically wider comes into play here. And you can see it represented in the schema through this kind of cylinder that says long-term data repository. So it's basically really in the back end of both data core, and it's perfectly connected. I mean, it's completely connected to data core and data catalog. It's really there in the back end to help preserve this data and also help also make it visible whenever possible. Whenever possible by the security requirements and the data governance. Yep, I think that's what I wanted to share. So obviously we use the cloud services a lot for all of those services. Oh, and thank you, Kenneth, for I should say what WIDER stands for. WIDER stands for the WCM Institutional Data Repository for Research. So it is really a place where you can see it as a deep archive right now. It's really a place where we archive your data for a while. until we need them again. But they're definitely very safe. There is completely HIPAA compliant. So you do not need to de-identify your data to archive your data in Wider, for example. That's how locked down it is. And you're welcome, Kenneth. Thanks for the question. And yeah, I just wanted to take also this opportunity to give a quick reminder about Wider and when people are supposed to deposit in Wider. So according to the Cornell data retention policy, every time you publish a paper or a book or any manuscript, or every time your grant is about to close out, or obviously before you leave Weill Cornell Medicine, if you're moving to another institution, for example, or retiring, you would need to deposit all your data, all the raw data that you generated, either through those grants or for the specific papers, or that you generated before you leave the institution. You need to deposit all this data, raw data, into this WCM institutional data repository for research. And the whole process is, we try to make it really simple. The whole process relies on you indicating where is your data set, raw data located, basically, or at least give data access instruction. If, for example, you got your data from, let's say, CMS or any external data provider that are not like available on premise, or also from another institution. So let's say you have access to this data, but you don't own it per se. The least that you're required to do is to at least give some instruction on how to get access to exactly the same data set that you had access to. And the policy also requires you to deposit lab notebooks into Wider. So that all goes basically together in the form of a project that you created within Wider. What we recommend in general, because we are very aware that as a researcher, you're required by a lot of publishers also to deposit your data in a public repository, we recommend you to use them as much as possible. Even if you use the public repository to share your data, which you are required by a lot of funders right now, you still need to create a record in Wider to let us know that your data has been shared and deposited somewhere. So we have a record of that somewhere. So that's why you always need to connect to Wider somehow, even though even if you're not using it properly per se to deposit your data. And yeah, during the process, you're required to add the methods file, which basically is just a file that explains analytical steps that you performed on your raw data up to the published form of your data set. Again, if you have any questions, there is this website that I put here. I'm very happy to help you with that as well. The library in general is very happy to help you with any questions you may have. And I'm looking at other questions here, if I may. Anthony is asking, are there any best practice resources you can recommend with regards to data management during the life cycle of a project for ease of deposition into Wider? Yes, definitely. We have multiple people working on data generation and analysis and want to create an SOP for tax students, postdoc to keep data organized and accessible for archiving and retention. That's amazing. I'm really amazed by this. I definitely encourage you to do that. In general, there is some basic data management practices you can follow, such as giving unique identifiers to your data set, making sure you separate your data from your raw data from your process data. Try to have a folder where you have all these raw data untouched and use a copy of those to work and analyze. And I can go over more in details, but feel free to reach out to the library. I'm happy to give you more tips on that. More than happy, yeah, to help with that. And I see Kenneth saying, I see that there are more than one SaaS product available for data management. Which would you recommend? SaaS and Guide, SaaS Studio, or SaaS Classic? Thanks, Anthony. Yes, please do so. I would say the SaaS Classic should do just as fine. I mean, if you like to use SaaS Studio, you're more than welcome to do that. It's mostly for facilitating it's an interface that facilitates the interaction with SaaS. I would say SaaS Studio and SaaS Classic are good ones. But again, I'm not going to say anything against SAS and Guide if this is what you think is the best for you. It really depends on your usage. And we need to know more to answer that question more accurately. And I see we are at time.
Oh.
Any other question? Last
Yeah,
minute.
I don't see any other questions in the chat, although I will make sure Alice and Sarah, you get a copy of it just in case you'd like to reach out to anybody about their own projects. But thank you, Alice and Sarah, for telling us more about DataCore, and thank you all for joining us today. Again, if you were late, please look out for that follow-up email from me later today with the recording of today's session and the links that the DataCore team has provided so that you can reach out or make a request. So all of that will be in the follow-up email that you can feel free to share with colleagues who may also be interested in using this service. But have a great rest of the afternoon. And thank you again to Alice and Sarah. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep.